How do you show up to your conversations? Are you sharing authentically? What do you value? What do you appreciate in conversations? How do you want to be perceived? How do you build trust with somebody? And most of all, what do you expect from the leaders who you're communicating with? Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Women Worldwide. Thank you so much for showing up, for tuning in wherever you are on iTunes, or maybe you're watching on YouTube. We appreciate you. And also, just a note, keep the feedback coming, especially on Twitter. We're noticing an uptick on the engagement there because when you let us know about your challenges or what shows you like, then we're able to bring the guests and the advice to help you. All right, this is the part of the show where I usually talk about the topic, and then I say, and joining me on the show is our special guest. Well, today's a little bit different. The topic is going to be feel, which is really important for business professionals today. And it's just me trying something a little bit different. Now, let me just talk about feel for a second, because we use this word all of the time. It actually stands for an acronym and over a year's worth of research with millennials, interviewing them in one-on-one conversations, asking them, how do you show up to your conversations? Are you sharing authentically? What do you value? What do you appreciate in conversations? How do you want to be perceived? How do you build trust with somebody? And most of all, what do you expect from the leaders who you're communicating with? That's feel. And from all of the research, they built this model. So I call it feel first before you communicate. And that's super important. It might have been a 24-year-old millennial who brought me to feel. And of course, that is my stepdaughter, Noelle. When she passed away, I needed answers to all of those questions. And boy, did I get answers. So I want to share some of the things that I learned from millennials around feel. And I'd also like to, based on that, give you some advice for your challenges when it comes to feel throughout your communication. So as I was chatting with millennials, there were so many stories. First of all, I thought that these interviews, these conversations were only going to be, let's say, 10 minutes a pop. I would have been happy with 10 minutes of somebody's time. But 10 minutes turned into 15 to 30 to 60 to some cases 90 minutes. That's amazing. And what did I learn? I'll tell you a few stories that stand out in my mind that relate to feel. So, and it's interesting because the stories actually get multiplied. If one person shared a story, there were probably 10 others who had a similar story. When it comes to facing fears, that part of the model really was around conversations with several millennials that basically said, why aren't our leaders being straight with us? What are they afraid of? I thought that was really interesting. So business professionals, ask yourselves that question. Why is it that you're communicating maybe in person, through your town halls, through social media, and the reaction that you're getting is, whoa, why aren't you being transparent? Why are you afraid to tell us what's going on? Why don't you trust us enough? Now, this specifically comes from a conversation I remember with a millennial who said, I don't understand. We have so many ideas. We want to share. it takes like 3 years, and this was in her words, it takes like 3 years to even be invited by a manager to get to the table to share. And, it's almost this unspoken rule that nobody really wants to hear from you if you're not at a certain point, and there's a protocol within the company, which begged the question from her, why wouldn't you want a different perspective from a younger professional? And wouldn't this make us all innovative? What are you afraid of? This was fascinating information. There's also a study, and I think it was a recent Deloitte millennial study that said 42% of millennials believe that if a company is more diverse in perspective, is open and inclusive, well, guess what? They're going to be more innovative. So when it comes to being open and getting the rich perspective, ask yourself, are you open to it? Are you actually allowing different opinions to come out and filter through? Or are you perhaps shutting them down quickly? Here's the rub. If you shut things down, you don't advance the relationship, especially with a millennial. It makes it a lot harder to build that relationship and to have them feel as a valued member of the team. So that's a little bit on face fears. Then there's the empathy bucket. And millennials, this was probably 90% of the millennials that I spoke to wanted the compassion, the kindness, and yes, the empathy. And there was one story from a young woman, and you could take this story and once again, put it across the board, where she wasn't feeling well, she was having a problem with her health, she had to go to the hospital, and she was designated a piece of a project. As a matter of fact, her supervisor had split up parts of a project with this one millennial and 4 other team members. And as this millennial was working on her piece of the project, she felt herself getting sick. She ends up in the hospital, but rather than letting her team know that she was in fact having a health issue, she would rather hand in something that was subpar and not the caliber that she would normally present and give back to her supervisor and her team. And she explained it like this. She felt that the environment was not caring and was not kind, and the fact that she wasn't feeling well would not be met with empathy. Now, you're probably sitting there listening to this and saying, oh my gosh, I hope that's not my organization. This happens all of the time. And it's not like you could listen to this story and then go back to one of your meetings with one of your teams, or notice that a teammate was a little quiet or something was different about the way he or she was participating in a meeting. And you couldn't say to that person, hey, Joe, you're a little quiet. What's the matter today? Are you okay? Are you feeling all right? Because Joe, in an environment that doesn't feel safe, that doesn't feel kind and doesn't feel caring, what's Joe going to say? Joe's going to say, no. I've got this. It's okay. I'm fine. Because Joe is not going to open up to you to say, my girlfriend or boyfriend or whoever just dumped me and I feel like crap. My world is crumbling, or I've got debt up to my eyeballs and this job isn't paying the bills and I have to get a second job, which is really taking its toll on my life and my health. That's what's happened. So if there's no trust, you can't go and have instant empathy. Empathy is a build. And the more the trust builds, the more you can move from cognitive empathy to emotional empathy to compassionate empathy with deep understanding, where you can truly come up with like an action plan to help somebody. All right, the next part of the feel model is the third E, which is ethics. Think of it this way. At that point of connection, at that point of engagement, wherever you communicate, in person, through social media, with the media, through your interviews, on stage, if you don't carry your ethics and your values with you, you are not going to have a relationship, and all credibility will be out the window. So I just noted that in a lot of my interviews that millennials were feeling that a significant portion of their companies were not exactly ethical in communication, were not always as accurate as they would like them to be. Now, let's face it, there's a lot that goes on social media. You're seeing people sharing information that's being fact checked, that clearly is embellished, that clearly is not true, that's clearly called alternative facts in some cases. All of this affects how people grow with you, how people want to be a part of your world, and the credibility and the trust that you're going to build. So, in the case of sharing with the media or sharing directly with your audience on social media, or perhaps you're bringing information to people in your company, you want to be able to bring across what's going on. Sometimes it's really good. Sometimes it's not so good. But for those millennial audiences, this is a pure example where a young millennial said, I don't understand why leaders can't actually tell us what's going on. We hear about it. It's a part of the rumor grapevine. It's around the water cooler. It's getting out on social media, yet they're painting a picture to people who could be their champions, who can go out and say the right things and have the right information. And where's the trust if you're not actually telling what's good that's going on and what's not so good? So building trust means you trust somebody with whatever it is, and you're helping them to understand how, when, and why they should share. And it is important that if the information is proprietary, if it's time sensitive, if it can't be shared through an employee of the company, but needs to get shared through an official representative, that all makes sense. But even just communicating that to one of your own, that says you trust them. Millennials like this. And that's not just millennials. All of this feel model, it really is for people. It's human. It's all generations. Now, the last part of the feel model is the L, which stands for love. That's unleash your love for your mission. I remember one millennial saying to me, I don't understand why our leaders choose not to have a voice out on social media or in the media. We are talking internally about issues that are affecting our clients. And in this case, it happened to be clients in the ride sharing space. And the group of millennials within the company was just wondering, how can you be so vocal within, but not want to take a stance and talk about things externally and be that voice and lend your voice and perspective? Millennials have a lot of passion. They're also super, super entrepreneurial. I read today a very interesting letter to leaders, and you know what? This really sums it up. The name of the article, it's called Why Millennials Quit, a letter to incompetent leaders. And this is by Tim Denning, and this article was on Medium. Tim, this was a really good article, and a lot of what you said in this article, I learned through my millennial discussions. Tim in the article quoted around how millennials are super entrepreneurial. It's not just giving them one piece to be a cog in the wheel, but to really empower them to understand everything that's going on and to give them the trust to be able to do something from start to finish. Millennials like to be entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs within your companies, give them the flexibility to work remotely at times and to communicate differently amongst themselves. The work structure is set up very differently. I had millennials share with me how much they appreciated the ability to have Slack within the organization, to have text-based messaging systems, to have meetings that are more open circle, and within those meetings to have leaders be a little bit more vulnerable and share what's going on. This is love. This ignites the passion. Remember, when you're sharing at that point, at that connection, the point of engagement, it's also about your energy and how much you believe in what you're doing as a leader. Because if you do, and if you approach it the right way with a millennial or any generation, you're going to be met with enthusiasm and energy and people who want to join your cause, whether they're within your company and they want to do more and they want to take on more exciting challenges, or they're outside of your company and you have brand ambassadors and champions, stakeholders on the outside who are going to be sharing enthusiastically, especially through social media. Okay, well, I did say that I would give you some advice for all parts of feel. This is a roadmap. This is about taking, maybe it's baby steps in some cases. Your roadmap actually begins with you taking the Feel First test. So go to feelfirsttest.com. Very simple, just type in feelfirsttest.com and take the test. It is 32 questions. It's 8 questions per area of the feel model, but that's going to evaluate and score you. And it's going to let you know how well you, if you are facing your fears, it's going to let you know how you do in the empathy department. It's going to let you know how ethical you are and if you use good judgment and if you're unleashing the love. Once you get your score, you need to think about a roadmap. The test actually gives you exercises so you can do them to increase how much you feel, and then take that and use feel through your channels. Now, for me, some of the things that I'm doing, I find in the face fears arena, in order to get to the open and inclusive, I really have to quiet my mind. I have to cut back on the technology. I don't go into meetings with a lot of bings and pings. I won't wear my smartwatch into a meeting because it'll just be telling me all the notifications. I will, if I have to bring my phone, I will put it down, face down, turn notifications off, clear all the negative chatter from my mind so that I can actually be present. That's step number 1. If I'm at all going into any kind of communication where I'm feeling challenged, or I know it might be a tough audience or tough questions, and maybe I'm a little bit overwhelmed, well, then I use some tips from my friend, Stephanie D'Alfonso, who is on Women Worldwide. Stephanie's book, Goodbye Anxiety, Hello Freedom, has some great tips in it. And to this day, I still do the big stretch, which does something to calm your body down, your nervous system. That stretch gets you to feel better, to feel at ease. Sometimes it's knowing a yawn can calm you down, or a smile can make you feel better. I also know a technique that I'm going to share right now, which lets you just pause, breathe, and then ask, why? Tell me why. How did you get to that conclusion? I want to understand. I want to learn how you feel. That right there in a difficult conversation is so important, because not only does it let you get to a place of a little more understanding about why somebody says something that might possibly put up a wall and make you want to retreat, that you listen instead and find out more. This is all a part of my roadmap. I've been doing this lately around political conversations. It actually works. You don't have to always agree with somebody, but if you can ask why a few times and put somebody else at ease, that goes a long way. Because let's face it, if you shut down a conversation quickly because you don't want to listen, because you hear some perspective that you don't agree with, where's the relationship going to go from there? It's not. In the empathy department, I really do believe it does start with listening and being an active listener. Take your meetings. How much do you actually pay attention? I'll give you a good one. And this isn't a meeting, this is something personal. I'll walk into my husband's office and I'll want to share something with him that's important. Um, and he'll be looking at his computer screen and typing as he says, "Go ahead, I'm listening." And I say, "Really? Are you really listening? You can't be listening. You're not even looking at me. You're not giving me your attention." Active listening means that you're looking at somebody, that your body language is letting them know that you're listening. And yes, that could be great eye contact. It could be some of the other cues that you're giving where you're leaning into a conversation, or yes, maybe you are nodding in agreement, or perhaps maybe it's disagreement and you're going to share something. Whatever it is, that active listening is really important. Another exercise that you can do to see how empathetic you are is to think about maybe one or two recent situations that you've had that haven't turned out very well, in the sense that you weren't listening, and as a result, you weren't able to formulate the proper direction, or you had a response that wasn't appropriate. If you could go back and redo those conversations, or perhaps you weren't able to help somebody who was having trouble, what would you do? How would you have changed the way that you were interacting to get to a place of at least what I call cognitive empathy, which means that you have an understanding of what they're going through so that you can adjust your own behavior, right? And be able to communicate in such a way that helps them, that doesn't make them retreat further. So those are some tips on facing fears and empathy. When it comes to ethics, I'm going to give you one quick exercise to do, because this is your start. Companies do this all of the time. They define their values, right? Companies have core values for all of their employees. Sometimes they're in big posters on the wall. Sometimes you can find them in documents online. Sometimes it's in the company handbook. I say to you, what are your ethics and values? If I were to ask you right now to state your values in 30 seconds, like an elevator speech or pitch, could you? Could you do it? What do you value the most in your relationships, in your communication? I value truth. I value accuracy, respect, patience. Do that for yourself. Think about and define very clearly and see where these values fall with your own personal communication, as well as what you're expected to do professionally, and do your own values match that of your company. And lastly, in the love department, in the passion department, in the energy department, let me give you a little tip. Here's an exercise. If you don't score well in the energy, go have a conversation with 3 friends. Start easy. Have a conversation with friends. Share something that you're working on with a friend, and then ask them to rate you in the energy department. Ask them if you lit up, if your voice sounded enthusiastic when you shared, and was your energy light bulb on? The energy light bulb has to be on when you're sharing, because if you're not energetic, then why would anybody care what you're saying or what you're doing? And we take that into our media interviews as well. So if you're a professional and you're with the media and you're interviewing and you don't turn that energy light bulb up, it's not going to interest them to ask you more questions and to build that relationship deeper. And when it reaches the people who are listening or watching or reading whatever is written about you, they're not going to get that level of energy and passion that comes through. This is the feel model. I hope the tips, the exercises help you. It is so important to feel through all of your channels, because anybody can show up with their expertise. Anybody can share their messaging and their talking points. What makes the difference is the fact that at that point of connection and engagement, you can take whatever is a simple transaction or interaction and make it so much deeper through your ability to feel. Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in to Women Worldwide. And like I always say, friends, stay energized, focused,